You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we preview the ICC World Test Championship Final between India and New Zealand from Southampton. It's the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast, and let's get started. Let's have a look at both teams and their squads for the ICC World Test Championship Final. We'll start with India's squad. Rohit Sharma, Shubman Gill, Cheshwar Pujara, Virat Kohli, Ajinkya Rahane, Rishabh Pant, Ravindra Jadeja, Hanuma Vihari, Umesh Yadav, Ravichandran Ashwin, Mohammad Shami, Ishant Sharma, Jasprit Bumrah, Mohammad Siraj, and Wriddhiman Saha. Let's have a look at New Zealand's squad for the WTC Final. Kane Williamson, Tom Blundell, Trent Boult, Devon Conway, Colin de Granholm, Matt Henry, Kyle Jamieson, Tom Latham, Henry Nicholls, Asjaz Patel, Tim Southey, Ross Taylor, Neil Wagner, BJ Watling, and Will Young. So that's India and New Zealand's squads for the ICC World Test Championship Final. Let's talk about India's squad for the World Test Championship Final. The squad they've selected is a pretty strong squad, full of very fine Test cricketers. India has some good depth in this squad as well, full of match winners, lots of experience at Test match level, quality batting lineup, quality bowling attack. And what makes this Indian team great is their mentality, mindset, attitude, resilience, self-belief, and mental toughness. All those qualities make this Indian team great, because this Indian team doesn't fear anything. Whatever comes their way, they're always up to the challenge. We saw that in Australia when India had all those injuries to their squad, and they still believed that they could win that series, and they did. All their players believed in themselves and can achieve anything. That's the key quality there in this Indian team, is that they've got that self-belief. Everyone in this squad can believe that they can achieve anything. We saw that in Australia, obviously. We saw that against the England series, I should say, in India's home summer just recently. So whatever challenge this Indian team are faced with, they can conquer it. Now, definitely, this is going to be a big challenge for them. This World Test Championship Final is probably the biggest challenge that they've faced in the last few months to a year. The biggest challenge for them is, how do they beat this New Zealand side? It's going to be hard, because New Zealand are playing good cricket, and India, they know they have to be on their game to beat this quality New Zealand side. So that's the biggest challenge for them, first of all. The other challenge is, how will they deal with the lack of preparation before the final? Now, they haven't played any test matches, India, whereas New Zealand played 2 test matches against England before this final, which puts them in good stead. Whereas India, they didn't play any test matches. All they played was some intra-squad games among themselves. But it's not the same as a competitive test match. They are in a bit of a disadvantage there, India, not playing a competitive test match. But I'm sure they will adjust and make that adjustment into this final. The other challenge is, how do they adjust to English conditions? Obviously, they've been in England for some time now, so they've gotten used to the conditions. So I think they've already adjusted well to the conditions, but time will tell once we get into the final. The biggest challenge for India is their batting. Now, how can they handle New Zealand's bowlers? Because India's batsmen will have to be very watchful with the swinging and seaming ball that New Zealand bowl. Their records in England aren't the best in Test cricket, and we'll have a look at their records in England in terms of their batsmen's records in Test cricket. So Virat Kohli scored 727 runs with 2 centuries, but he's averaging 36. Rahane, 10 games he's played in England, 556 runs, average of 29 with 1 century. Pujara's played 9 games, 500 runs, average of 29 with 1 century. Jadeja, he's played 5 games for 276 runs with 2 half-centuries, averaging 30. Ashwin, 6 matches he's played in England, 232 runs at an average of 25. Pant, he's played 3 games in England, 162 runs, average of 27 with 1 century. Vihari's played one game. He's got 56 runs, averaging 28 with one half century. Rohit Sharma's only played one game in England, 34 runs for an average of 17. So their record in English conditions is not the best, India. And that's sort of the thing with players coming from the subcontinent to English conditions. They always struggle with the swinging and seaming ball. So it's no surprise there with their stats there. Obviously, all of them are very fine batsmen, but they just have a very tough time of it in England. So that's the biggest challenge for India, is their batsmen. Can they stand up? Can they face the pressure from the New Zealand bowlers head on? Can they conquer that challenge? I think they can. But everyone needs to bat with a sense of disciplined, patience, making sure they get through the tough periods. And that's what India's batsmen need to do. There's a bit of vulnerability there with the batting from India. Because of their records are not great in England, I should say. Their records are not great. So there is a slight vulnerability there with their batting. So if there's a batting collapse to happen, who's the key batsman to stop that from happening? So if a batting collapse does happen in this final, which it may do, you never know, but who's going to be the key batsman, as I said before, to stop that from happening? The key batsman to stop that from happening is Cheshwar Pujara. Why? Because he can bat long periods of time. He's got good defence, solid technique, plays that anchor role that everyone bats around him in this batting order from India. He's going to be the glue to hold this Indian batting lineup together. Whenever a batting collapse happens, he's got to be the guy to get him out of it. So he's going to be the key batsman for India for sure in this WTC final. So the Indian batsmen, they need to do to conquer this New Zealand bowling attack, they need to be watchful, they need to be patient, disciplined, build partnerships, find a way to get through the tough periods, show that mental toughness, as we've seen from New Zealand when they played against England with their batting. Because New Zealand's bowlers will be relentless in their lines and lengths, as we saw against England. Get in, get set, and make a big score to put the team into a good position. Runs in the first innings will be key for India. If they can get a lot of runs in the first innings, that puts them in a good position in this final. They also need some runs from the lower order because the tail enders need to contribute as well. So if there's a batting collapse and the top order and middle order fails, the runs from the lower and tail enders will be key as well. So they need everyone contributing, India. So that's the challenge that India face in this final. And I think they're up to the challenge. I think their batsmen are up to the challenge because this Indian side, any challenge that gets thrown in front of them, they can take it head on and look to conquer it. But that's going to be the biggest challenge for India. How do they cope against New Zealand's bowlers in these conditions that are so foreign to them? And their records are not great in England. So that's going to be the big challenge for them. The other challenge for India is how to take 20 wickets against this quality New Zealand batting lineup. Their bowlers obviously are very good, India's bowlers. The quality of Bumrah, Shami, Siraj, Ashwin, Jadeja, Ishant Sharma, their records in England are pretty good. Ishant Sharma's taken 43 wickets, Shami's taken 21 wickets, Jadeja's taken 16 wickets, Ashwin 14 wickets, and Bumrah 14 wickets in England. So all of their bowlers know how to bowl in English conditions. So that will put them in good stead for this final. India, they need to be consistent in their lines and lengths. Be patient because the New Zealand batsmen will be very disciplined and patient with their batting. We saw that in the series against England. Making sure they execute their plans with the ball and making sure that every chance they create has to be taken. They can't miss opportunities. They can't afford to drop catches, miss field, or anything like that because it's going to be very rare to dismiss New Zealand cheaply because they're such a disciplined batting unit. So they've got to take every chance that comes their way, India. Otherwise, if New Zealand get off to a good start, it's going to be a long way back. So if the Indian bowlers can do that, then they can take 20 wickets and hopefully win this WTC final. So that's the biggest challenge, which is confronting the Indian bowlers, is that they need to be on, essentially. They've got to be switched on. They've got to take every chance that comes their way. They're quality bowlers. They know what they're doing. The biggest contribution from this Indian bowling attack is their spinners. Can Ashwin and Jadeja get some wickets with their spin? Now, the pitch here in Southampton is going to turn a little bit, so they'll be banking on Ashwin and Jadeja to take most of the wickets, India. Their seamers will go about their work. It's up to India's spinners to take the wickets as well if they can, if the pitch does offer a bit of turn. So that's the challenge for India in this WTC final. Overall, India has a quality squad and should be feeling confident about their chances of winning the WTC final. Let's talk about New Zealand's squad for the WTC final. It's a pretty strong squad, well-experienced squad, full of match winners, a team who just gets on with it and let their cricket do the talking. That's what I like about New Zealand. They just get on with it. A team who fights and scraps, as we saw in the England series, that determination, that fight, that character that New Zealand have. And that's why New Zealand are such a great team, because of all those characters and qualities that they have in this side. What are some of the challenges that New Zealand will face in this WTC final? Well, the biggest challenge of them all is how to beat this Indian side. It's a quality Indian team full of match winners, and it's going to be a very tough challenge for New Zealand, but I'm sure New Zealand will be up to the challenge. Now, some of the challenges for them is their batsmen. How can their batsmen handle India's quality bowlers in Ishant Sharma, Shami, Siraj, Bumrah, Ashwin, Jadeja? How can they handle them? Well, I think for New Zealand, they need to keep batting the way they did against England. They don't need to change anything. Just keep doing what you've been doing and what's been successful for you in the past. And that's being patient, being disciplined, being watchful, show that fight and mental toughness to get through the tough periods. Bat accordingly to the situation, get in and get set, make big scores, back up partnerships to put the team in a good position. I think that's what New Zealand need to do to combat India's bowlers, who are a quality bowling attack. So if New Zealand keep batting the way they batted against England, then they won't have any problems at all in this WTC final against India. But the other challenge that New Zealand face in their batsmen is India's spinners. Ashwin and Jadeja are going to be a handful. So how do they combat them? Well, the pitch in Southampton may turn a little bit. It has turned here in the past in Southampton. So Ashwin and Jadeja's impact on the game will be quite significant in terms of India's chances of winning this WTC final. But the ball won't turn as much as it does in Indian conditions compared to English conditions. The ball in England spins very little. So it spins slowly, basically. Whereas in India, you get that sharp turn and that sort of spin that spins fast. Whereas in England, it's a lot slower. So batsmen have time to adjust to the spin. But they're still going to be very dangerous to face. So they've got to have some clear plans to Ashwin and Jadeja. Use your feet. Make sure you get to the pitch of the ball. Use your feet. Maybe bat out of your crease or something like that. So that's what the New Zealand batsmen need to do to Ashwin and Jadeja. Because if the pitch does spin a little bit, those two are going to be a handful. And for New Zealand, they didn't really face quality spinners in the England series. They only faced Joe Root and Dan Lawrence. That was about it. But now they're facing quality spinners in Ashwin and Jadeja. So the plan for the New Zealand batsmen is to make sure that they're pretty patient towards them. Also being disciplined, being watchful. Also problem solving. So batting outside the crease, as I said before. Making sure you get to the pitch of the ball. All that stuff. So that's going to be very important for New Zealand, how they combat the Indian spinners. But if they keep batting the way they batted against England, then this New Zealand side will be feeling pretty confident about posting big scores in this final. Because essentially, runs on the board are going to be very useful in a final. Also, the other challenge is for New Zealand's bowlers. The challenge for them is how to take 20 wickets up against this quality Indian batting lineup. Well, for New Zealand, they just need to bowl the way they bowled against England, essentially. Keep doing what they've been doing. Don't change anything. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, as they say. So they need to continue being disciplined and relentless with their lines and lengths, as we saw in the second test match against England at Edgbaston. Be consistent with their lines and lengths. If they do that, that creates pressure, and the Indian batsmen will be feeling under pressure, not scoring. The bowlers are hitting their lines and lengths on a consistent basis. They play a rash shot, they get out, and that creates chances for New Zealand. Also be clear with their plans with the ball and make sure they execute those plans. Be patient against this quality Indian batting lineup and make sure that every chance they create has to be taken, because you can't miss opportunities in a big final like this. You can't afford to drop a catch. You can't afford to misfield. You've got to take every opportunity that comes to you. So for New Zealand's bowlers, they're just going to keep doing what they've been doing against England, essentially. So if they do that, they can take 20 wickets and put India under pressure in this WTC final. Overall, New Zealand have the squad to challenge India, and it will be feeling confident about their chances of winning the WTC final. Let's have a look at India and New Zealand's test match stats between the two countries. Head-to-head in test matches overall, India 21, New Zealand 12. Both teams' records in England in test matches. India have won 7 test matches. New Zealand have won 6 test matches. Leading run scorer is Rahul Dravid with 1,659 runs. Leading wicket taker, Richard Hadlee with 65. Most dismissals, MS Dhoni with 33. Most catches, Stephen Fleming with 20. Most matches, Sachin Tendulkar with 24. And the first test match that India and New Zealand played was back in 1955. So those are all the stats from India and New Zealand in test matches. Let's have a look at the ICC World Test Championship final playing conditions that the ICC have announced. The third umpire will automatically review calls of short runs by on-field umpires and communicate the decision to the field umpire before the next ball is bowled. Before reviewing an LBW decision, the fielding captain or the dismissed batter can check with the on-field umpires whether they thought a genuine attempt was made to play the ball. For LBW reviews, the height margin of the wicket zone has been lifted to the top of the stumps to ensure the same umpire's call margin around the stumps for both height and width. In case of a draw or tie, both India and New Zealand will be crowned joint winners. Grade 1 Dukes balls will be used. A reserve day will be used if playing time cannot be recovered through normal provisions of making up lost time each day. There will be an additional day's play if a positive result is not achieved after 5 full days of play, and the match will be declared a draw in such a scenario. In the event of time being lost during the match, the ICC match referee will regularly update the teams and media about the way in which the reserve day may be used. The final decision on whether the reserve day needs to be used will be announced at the schedule of the last hour on the 5th day. So those are the ICC World Test Championship final playing conditions. Let's have a look at India's and New Zealand's road to the ICC World Test Championship final. We'll start with India. They played 6 series, won 12, lost 4, drawn 1. One against the West Indies 2-0, one against South Africa 3-0, one against Bangladesh 2-0, lost against New Zealand 2-0, one against Australia 2-1, and one against England 3-1. Let's have a look at New Zealand's road to the final. They played 5 series, won 7, lost 4, drawn 0. They won against England 1-0, lost to Australia 3-0, one against India 2-0, one against the West Indies 2-0, and one against Pakistan 2-0. So those are the road to the ICC World Test Championship final for India and New Zealand. Let's preview the ICC World Test Championship final between India and New Zealand from Southampton. Talk about the potential 11s for both teams and who's going to win the ICC World Test Championship final. Let's have a look at India and New Zealand's record in test matches at Southampton. India have played 2 games here in Southampton and have lost both of those games, whereas New Zealand, this WTC final will be their first ever test match at Southampton. Let's have a look at both teams' potential 11s for the WTC final. Let's start with India's potential 11. Gill, Rohit Sharma, Pujara, Kohli, Rahane, Pant, Jadeja, Ashwin, Ishant Sharma, Siraj or Shami, and Bumrah. Now, there's going to be a tough selection call to be made there from India, either to pick Mohammad Siraj or Mohammad Shami. Now, both bowlers are pretty good bowlers in Test cricket. Mohammad Shami has experience in England. He's taken 21 wickets in England, whereas Mohammad Siraj hasn't played any games in England. So I think India may go with Mohammad Shami in terms of his experience in English conditions. But if they want to go the other way and pick Siraj, that's okay as well. Two of them are very fine bowlers, so it's going to be a very tough selection call there for India. But I think India may go into this WTC final with that potential 11. Let's have a look at New Zealand's potential 11 for the WTC final. Latham, Conway, Williamson, Taylor, Nichols, Watling, de Granholm, Southey, Jamieson, Patel or Wagner, and Bolt. Again, same as India, tough selection call for New Zealand here, either Asjas Patel or Neil Wagner. Now, if New Zealand want to play a frontline spinner, which I think they should, here in Southampton, a pitch where spin does come into the game, late into the game, I think they may go with Asjas Patel. If that's the case, Neil Wagner unfortunately misses out. But if New Zealand want to go the other way and play 4 quicks, then Patel misses out and Neil Wagner comes in for him. So two of them are very fine bowlers for New Zealand. It's going to be a tough call for New Zealand there in terms of who they leave out and who they keep in the side. So I think New Zealand may go into the WTC final with that potential 11. Who do I think is going to win the first ever ICC World Test Championship final? I think New Zealand are going to win the WTC final. The reason I say New Zealand is because it's their time to win an ICC event. They are a quality side full of talented cricketers with lots of experience, and they will be worthy winners of the WTC final. India will have a challenge on their hands to beat this New Zealand side. What are my thoughts on this ICC World Test Championship final? This is going to be a cracking test match between two very good sides in world cricket. Both teams deserve to win the WTC final. Regardless of who wins the WTC final, let's hope we get a good competitive test match, and let's hope the rain stays away, and may the best team win. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get the latest episodes of the podcast, and like and share our Facebook page, and follow us on Twitter. Until next time, keep safe, and bye for now.